Hey guys, tonight we are heading out across the dark, rolling water to a place where time seems to stand still. We are going to become the guardians of the light, standing watch on a lonely rock miles away from the nearest neighbor. Imagine the cool breeze on your face and the smell of salt in the air as you approach a towering structure made of stone and glass. You probably believe this was a life of pure silence and meditation, but keepers often had to deal with the constant vibration of the wind and the endless task of polishing every single inch of brass until it shone like gold. It was a job for the patient and the brave. As the boat gets closer, the lighthouse seems to grow, stretching up toward the clouds. You see the white paint peeling slightly from the salt, and the small windows that look like tiny eyes watching the horizon. You can feel the vibration of the engine beneath your feet as the boat moves through the swells. This is the beginning of a long journey into the solitude of the sea. It is a world where the sun and the moon are your only true companions, and the rhythm of the tide dictates the flow of your day. Before you get too comfortable and possibly fall asleep halfway through, tap like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this odd mix of boredom and history. It keeps the channel alive and the stories just sleepy enough to help you drift off again next time. I always enjoy reading about where you are in the world, so please let me know your location and the local time in the comments. It makes the world feel a little smaller and more connected. Now, dim the lights, let the world outside grow quiet, and turn on a fan if you like that soft, steady hum in the background. Let your shoulders loosen and your breathing slow. This is your time to drift. No rush, no deadlines, no noise. Just you, a little warmth in the air, and the faint whisper of history waiting to unfold. So, settle in and let's ease gently into tonight's journey together. The small supply boat moves slowly through the gray water. You sit on a hard wooden bench, holding the collar of your heavy wool coat close to your neck. The ocean is not blue today. It is the color of a wet sidewalk, deep and mysterious. Every time the boat hits a wave, a fine mist of cold, salt water sprays over the side. It feels like tiny needles against your skin. You look ahead and see the island. It is not really an island in the way people think of them. There are no palm trees or sandy beaches here. It is a jagged tooth of granite sticking out of the Atlantic Ocean. This is the rock where you will live for the next several months. You watch the lighthouse grow taller with every minute. It is a massive pillar of stone, painted in bright white and red stripes. At the very top, the glass of the lantern room catches the dim afternoon light. You wonder if the boat is going to crash into the rocks. But the captain knows these waters well. He brings the boat alongside a small iron ladder that is bolted directly into the stone. The waves are restless. The boat rises and falls 3 or 4 feet with every swell. You have to wait for the exact moment when the boat is at the top of a wave to reach out and grab the cold metal rungs. Your hands are a bit shaky, but you find your grip. You pull yourself onto the ladder and begin the climb. The metal is slippery with sea moss and salt. Your heavy boots make a dull sound against the rungs as you move upward. Above you, the previous keeper is waiting. He does not say a word, but he reaches down to help you pull your heavy bags onto the landing. You stand on the solid rock and take a deep breath. The air is incredibly fresh, though it smells strongly of wet stone and old fish. You realize that the boat is already pulling away. The captain waves a hand, and the small vessel turns back toward the mainland. You watch it go until it is just a tiny dark speck on the horizon. You are now officially alone. The keeper who is leaving leads you toward the heavy iron door at the base of the tower. He hands you a large brass key. It is heavy and cool in your palm. You push the door open, and the hinges make a long, slow groaning sound. Inside, the air is thick and smells of kerosene, beeswax, and wood smoke. It is a very specific smell that you will soon associate with home. The walls are incredibly thick. You can see the depth of the stone in the window frames. These walls were built to survive storms that could knock down a forest. You look around the ground floor. This is the storage room. There are wooden barrels filled with oil, sacks of flour, and tins of tea. Everything is organized with perfect precision. The lighthouse service has very strict rules about how things must be kept. You notice a small framed list on the wall. It is the official rule book for keepers. Some people used to call the keepers the wicked, because the inspectors were so mean about finding even a single speck of dust. You hope you can keep things clean enough. If you think your apartment back home was hard to keep tidy, imagine trying to fight off the entire ocean, trying to turn everything into rust and mold. You start the long climb up the spiral staircase. The stairs are made of cast iron, and they wind around the inside of the tower like a giant metal vine. Each step is narrow and steep. You feel the muscles in your legs begin to burn as you go higher. There are small windows every few floors. Through them, you see the ocean getting further and further away. It is a bit like climbing a very long ladder inside a chimney. You pass the kitchen floor. It has a small black stove and a wooden table that is bolted to the floor, so it does not move during a gale. You pass the bedroom floor. There is a single bed with a thick wool blanket. The walls are curved, so the furniture has to be curved to match. It is a very cozy space, but you realize you will never have a square corner to hide a dust bunny in again. Finally, you reach the very top. You enter the watch room. This is where you will spend your nights. In the center of the room, a heavy pedestal rises toward the ceiling. On top of it sits the great light. You step up into the lantern room. This is the heart of the lighthouse. The walls here are made entirely of glass. In the center of the room is the Fresnel lens. It is a masterpiece of engineering. It looks like a giant glass beehive made of hundreds of polished prisms. In 1822, Augustin John Fresnel invented this lens, and it changed everything for sailors. Before this, lights were weak and could not be seen from very far away. But this lens takes the light from a single flame and bends it into a powerful beam that can cut through miles of darkness. You reach out and touch the glass. It is smooth and cold. Historians still argue whether the keepers of the 1800s were more lonely than modern people with their screens, or if the sea provided a different kind of company that kept them sane. You look at the brass frame holding the glass. It is covered in a thin layer of oil. You know that tomorrow your work will begin. You will spend hours every day polishing this glass. If there is even a tiny bit of soot on the prisms, the light will not be as bright as it should be. You look out the windows. The sun is starting to dip toward the water. The sky is turning a soft shade of purple and orange. The ocean below looks like hammered silver. It is a beautiful sight. but you know that the beauty comes with a lot of responsibility. You are the only person for 20 miles who can keep this light burning. If the light goes out, ships will not know where the rocks are. You feel a small weight of worry in your chest, but you also feel a sense of pride. You are part of a long history of people who have stood in this very spot. You head back down the stairs to the kitchen. You decide to make your first meal in your new home. You have some dried meat and a tin of hard biscuits. You light a small fire in the stove. The wood is a bit damp, so it takes a moment to catch. You watch the small orange flames dance behind the iron grate. The stove begins to give off a gentle warmth. You boil some water for tea. The sound of the water bubbling is the only noise in the room, other than the distant sound of the waves. You sit at the small wooden table and eat your simple dinner. It is not a feast, but it feels good to have something warm in your stomach. You think about the people back on the mainland. They are probably sitting in loud restaurants or walking down busy streets. Here there is only the wind and the sea. You realize that you will have to get used to the silence. Or rather, it is not silent, but the sounds are different. You hear the soft hiss of the gas in the pipes. You hear the heavy ticking of the clockwork mechanism that turns the lens. It sounds like a giant heart beating inside the tower. You finish your tea and wash your cup in a small basin. You have to be careful with water. Every drop has to be collected from the rain or brought over by the supply boat. You can't just turn on a tap and let it run. It makes you appreciate the small things more. You decide it is time to start the light. You climb back up to the lantern room. The sky is almost dark now. You take a small match and strike it against the wall. The flame is tiny but bright. You carefully light the wick of the lamp inside the lens. At first, the flame is small. You adjust the flow of the oil, and the flame grows into a steady, bright glow. Now, you have to start the rotation. The lens does not just sit still. It must spin so that it creates a flashing signal. This helps sailors identify which lighthouse they are looking at. To make it spin, you have to wind up a set of heavy weights. These weights hang down the center of the spiral staircase on a long steel cable. You grab the iron crank and begin to turn it. It is hard work. You can feel your shoulders straining as you lift the hundreds of pounds of lead. You turn the crank round and round. You hear the metallic clink of the gears as they lock into place. Finally, the weights are at the top. You release the brake, and the giant glass lens begins to move. It starts slowly, but soon it is spinning at a steady pace. The beams of light sweep across the dark room. 1, 2, 3. They flash across the ocean, reaching out toward the horizon. You stand there for a moment, watching the light. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic motion. The beams disappear into the darkness, and then return, over and over again. You feel like you have just started a great machine that will run all through the night. You look out at the water. You cannot see any ships yet, but you know they are out there. They are looking for you. They are waiting for that flash of white light to tell them they are safe. You move down to the watchroom just below the lantern. There is a small desk here and a chair. You have a logbook where you must record everything. You write down the time you lit the lamp. You write down the weather conditions. The wind is coming from the northeast. The sky is clear. The temperature is dropping. You notice a quirky tidbit in the old logbook left by the previous keeper. He wrote that he once saw a goat swimming in the ocean near the rocks. You laugh quietly to yourself. You wonder if he was seeing things after being alone for too long, or if there really was a very adventurous goat in these waters. You settle into your chair. You have a long night ahead of you. You have to check the light every hour to make sure the flame is steady and the lens is still spinning. You brought a few books with you, but you find it hard to focus on the words. You keep looking up at the ceiling, listening to the rotation of the light. You realize that your life is now measured in circles. The circle of the stairs, the circle of the tower, the circle of the light. It is a very different way to live. You feel a sense of calm washing over you. The world outside is vast and wild, but inside this stone pillar, everything is orderly and safe. You hear the wind pick up a little. It makes a low whistling sound as it passes through the metal railings outside. You lean back in your chair and close your eyes for just a moment, listening to the heartbeat of the lighthouse. The night goes by slowly. Every hour, you stand up and climb the short ladder back into the lantern room. You check the oil level in the reservoir. You trim the wick of the lamp with a pair of silver scissors to keep the flame from smoking. You look out at the dark world. Occasionally, you see a tiny light far away on the water. It is a ship. You imagine the sailors on the deck, looking toward your rock. They probably don't think about you as a person. To them, you are just a light. But that is okay. You are a part of the safety of the sea. You think about how people have been building beacons like this for thousands of years. From the giant fire on top of the Pharos of Alexandria to this modern glass lens, the goal has always been the same. We want to guide people home. You feel a connection to all those ancient keepers. You are all doing the same job. You look at your hands. They are a bit dirty from the oil and the soot. You realize that you will probably have stained fingers for as long as you live here. It is a small price to pay for the peace you feel. You think about the wicked inspectors again. You decide to take a rag and wipe down the brass base of the lamp. You rub the metal until you can see your own reflection in it. You look a bit tired, but your eyes are bright. You are doing a good job. As the hours pass, the stars begin to fade. The sky in the east starts to turn a very pale gray. You know that your first night is coming to an end. You watch the horizon closely. Slowly, a thin line of pink appears. The sun is coming back. You wait until the sun is fully above the water before you stop the light. You don't want to be even a minute late. When the light of the day is strong enough, you go up to the lantern room one last time. You turn the valve to cut off the oil. The flame flickers and then goes out. You put the brake on the rotation. The giant lens slows down and then stops. The room is suddenly very quiet. The ticking of the clockwork has ended. You feel a bit strange in the silence. You take a heavy linen cover and wrap it around the lens. This protects the glass from the heat of the sun during the day. If the sun shines through the prisms without the cover, it could actually start a fire inside the tower, because the glass acts like a giant magnifying lens. You wouldn't want to accidentally burn down your own house on the first day. That would be a very embarrassing story to tell the supply boat captain. You climb down the stairs to the kitchen. You are very tired, but you feel a sense of accomplishment. You survived your first night. You make a small bowl of porridge and eat it slowly. The sun is now shining through the small windows, creating bright spots on the stone floor. You look at the bed. It looks very inviting. You climb under the heavy wool blanket. The bed is small, but it is comfortable. You hear the waves crashing against the base of the tower far below. It is a steady, rhythmic sound that acts like a lullaby. You feel your muscles relax. Your breathing slows down. You are safe. You are warm. You are the keeper of the light, and your work for the day is almost done. You fall into a deep, dreamless sleep, knowing that the ocean will still be there when you wake up, and the light will be waiting for you to bring it back to life when the sun goes down again. The soft light of the morning sun filters through the thick, curved glass of your bedroom window, painting a pale yellow stripe across your wool blanket. You wake up not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the steady, rhythmic wash of the waves against the granite base of the tower far below. It is a sound that never truly stops, a deep and ancient pulse that seems to vibrate through the very stone of the walls. You lie there for a moment, feeling the warmth of the bed and the slight chill in the air. The room is small, but it feels incredibly secure. You are tucked inside a fortress of masonry, a vertical world where every object has its designated place. You push back the heavy covers and swing your feet onto the cold wooden floor. Your boots are waiting for you, their leather worn and supple from years of use. You pull them on and lace them tightly, feeling the familiar support around your ankles. The simple act of dressing feels like a ritual, a preparation for the day's quiet duties. You stand up and stretch, feeling the silence of the tower around you. It is not an empty silence, but a full one, occupied by the scent of old wood, salt air, and the faint, lingering smell of the kerosene you burned through the night. You walk down the spiral stairs to the kitchen level. The cast iron steps feel solid beneath your boots, and you find yourself counting them without even thinking about it. 1, 2, 3, 4. It is a habit you will soon develop, a way to measure your progress through the vertical landscape of your home. In the kitchen, you move toward the small black stove. You need to get the fire going again to boil water for your morning coffee. You take a small piece of driftwood from the basket and shave off a few thin curls of wood with your pocket knife. The wood is dry and smells of the sea. You strike a match and watch as the tiny flame catches the shavings, growing into a bright, cheerful fire. You set the heavy iron kettle on the stove and listen for the first signs of life. Soon, the water begins to hum, a soft and steady sound that grows into a vigorous bubbling. You pour the water over the coffee grounds, and the rich, dark aroma fills the small room. This is your morning luxury, a brief moment of indulgence before the real work begins. You sit at the wooden table and look out the window. The ocean today is a deep, sparkling blue, covered in thousands of tiny white caps that look like sheep grazing in a vast, watery field. You notice a small wooden box in the corner of the room. It is the traveling library, a collection of books provided by the Lighthouse service. These boxes are rotated between different stations every few months, giving the keepers something new to read. You feel a small thrill of excitement at the thought of a new story. In a world with no neighbors and no television, a book is more than just entertainment. It is a lifeline to other worlds and other minds. You think about how people today complain. if their internet is slow for 5 minutes, while you are perfectly content waiting 3 months for a new box of books that may or may not contain something you actually like. Once you have finished your coffee, it is time to face the most important task of the day. You climb the stairs, past the bedroom and the watchroom, until you reach the lantern room at the very top. The morning sun is bright here, and the room feels like a giant greenhouse. You move to the center of the room and carefully remove the linen cover from the Fresnel lens. The glass prisms sparkle in the sunlight, casting tiny rainbows across the white, painted walls. This is the great first-order lens, a massive assembly of glass and brass that stands over 10 feet tall. It is your primary responsibility to keep this lens in perfect condition. You pick up a soft chamois leather and a bottle of spirits of wine. You begin at the very top of the lens, reaching up to polish the highest prisms. You move the cloth in slow, circular motions, feeling the smooth surface of the glass. You have to be incredibly careful. If you leave a single fingerprint or a smudge of oil, it could catch the soot from the lamp and bake onto the glass, making it much harder to clean later. You work your way down, tier by tier. There are hundreds of individual prisms, each one designed to bend the light at a specific angle. It is a slow and meditative process. You find yourself focusing on the tiny details, the way the light bends as it passes through the glass, the faint clicking of your fingernails against the brass frame. You realize that you are not just cleaning a piece of equipment. You are maintaining a work of art. The Fresnel lens can capture nearly 85% of the light produced by the lamp, whereas the old-fashioned silver reflectors used before 1822 could only manage about 17%. It was a massive leap forward in maritime safety, saving countless lives by making the lights visible from much greater distances. As you work, you notice the brass frame that holds the prisms together. It is starting to lose its luster, showing a dull, greenish tint in some places. This is the result of the constant exposure to the salt air. You set aside the glass cleaner and reach for a tin of brass polish and a fresh rag. This is where the real labor begins. Polishing brass is a never-ending battle in a lighthouse. The WIT inspectors from the U.S. Lighthouse Board, which was established in 1852, were famous for their obsession with cleanliness. They would visit the stations unannounced and run a white, gloved finger over the railings and the lamp bases. If they found even a hint of dust or tarnish, the keeper could face a fine or even lose their job. You apply a small amount of the pink polishing paste to the rag and begin to rub the brass. It takes a lot of effort, and you can feel the muscles in your arms and shoulders starting to burn. You rub until the dull metal begins to shine, revealing a bright, golden surface that reflects the sunlight. You move around the pedestal, polishing every bolt and every hinge. You even polish the heavy iron weights that drive the clockwork mechanism. You imagine the inspectors coming up the stairs, their eyes searching for any sign of neglect. You take a certain pride in the thought that they would find nothing but perfection here. You are the master of this small, shining kingdom. You might not have much, but what you do have is kept in impeccable condition. You joke to yourself that if you ever go back to the mainland, you will probably end up polishing your neighbor's car bumpers, just out of habit. Beneath the giant lens sits the pedestal, which is part of a fascinating and slightly dangerous piece of technology. In many modern lighthouses of this era, the entire multi-ton lens assembly floats in a circular trough of liquid mercury. This allows the massive glass structure to rotate with almost zero friction, moved by a clockwork mechanism that requires very little power. You look at the silver liquid shimmering in the trough. It is beautiful, but you know you have to be careful not to touch it or breathe in any vapors. Historians still argue whether the legendary madness of some old lighthouse keepers was caused by the extreme isolation of the job or by long-term exposure to mercury fumes. It is a sobering thought. You check the level of the mercury and make sure the rotation is smooth. You give the lens a gentle push, and it glides silently around the pedestal, a testament to the precision of 19th century engineering. You feel a deep respect for the people who designed and built this machine. They created something that is both incredibly powerful and delicate at the same time. You take a moment to look out at the gallery, the narrow walkway that runs around the outside of the lantern room. You open the heavy iron door and step out into the wind. The wind on the gallery is much stronger than it felt inside the tower. It tugs at your hair and whistles through the iron railings. You walk slowly around the circumference of the tower, looking out at the vast expanse of the ocean. From this height, you can see the white lines of the waves as they break against the distant reefs. You look down at the base of the lighthouse and see the small garden you are trying to grow in a sheltered crevice of the rock. It is mostly just hardy herbs and a few stunted kale plants, but it provides a welcome splash of green in this world of gray and blue. You notice a quirky tidbit in your memory about a keeper on a nearby island who supposedly trained a seagull to bring him small pieces of driftwood for his stove. You watch a large gull soaring on the updrafts near the tower and wonder if it would be possible to make a friend out of such a wild creature. The gull looks back at you with a sharp, yellow eye, then tilts its wings and dives toward the water. You realize that you are the intruder here, a guest in the world of the birds and the fish. You take a deep breath of the salt-laden air, feeling it fill your lungs and clear your head. It is a cold, sharp feeling that makes you feel intensely alive. You look toward the horizon and see a thin trail of smoke. It is a steamship, moving slowly along the shipping lane. You feel a sense of connection to the people on that ship, even though they are miles away. You are the one who will guide them through the night, a silent guardian standing watch on the edge of the world. You step back inside the lantern room and close the door, the thick glass once again muffling the sound of the wind. You have a few more things to do before your morning work is finished. You need to trim the wicks of the lamp. You use a pair of specialized silver scissors to snip away the charred ends of the cotton wicks. This ensures that the flame will be clean and bright when you light it tonight. If the wicks are not trimmed correctly, the flame will flicker and produce soot, which will ruin all the hard work you just did polishing the prisms. You check the oil reservoir and make sure it is full. You use a small hand pump to transfer the oil from the large storage barrels on the ground floor up to the service tank in the watch room. It is a slow, rhythmic task, the sound of the pump echoing in the stone stairwell. You think about the supply boat and wonder when it will return. You are running low on fresh potatoes and would give almost anything for a fresh apple. You imagine the crunch of the fruit and the sweet juice, a contrast to the dry, salty food you have been eating lately. You realize that your perspective on life has changed. Small things that you used to take for granted now seem like incredible luxuries. A hot bath, a fresh piece of fruit, a conversation with another human being. These are the things that occupy your thoughts in the quiet moments of the day. You head down to the watch room and sit at the small desk. It is time to make the morning entry in the logbook. You dip your pen into the inkwell and write in a careful, steady hand. You record the weather, the condition of the light, and any sightings of ships. You also note the work you have completed today: polished lens, polished brass, trimmed wicks, refilled oil. It is a record of your existence, a way to prove that you are doing your duty, even when no one is watching. You notice an entry from several years ago in the same logbook. The keeper at the time wrote about a spectacular display of the aurora borealis that turned the entire sky a deep, glowing green. You hope that you will get to see something like that during your stay here. You close the book and set it aside. Your morning chores are done, and you have several hours of free time before you need to prepare for the night watch. You decide to spend some time in the kitchen, perhaps trying to bake a simple loaf of bread. You have a bag of flour and some yeast, and the warmth of the stove will help the dough rise. You enjoy the feeling of the flour on your hands and the rhythmic motion of kneading the dough. It is another form of meditation, a way to keep your hands busy while your mind wanders. You think about the history of this place, the many keepers who have stood where you are standing and done exactly what you are doing. You feel like you are part of a long, unbroken chain of service. The dough is finally ready, and you set it in a bowl near the stove to rise. You sit back in your chair and pick up a book from the library box. It is a travel log about a journey through the mountains of South America. You read about lush jungles, towering peaks, and exotic animals. It feels strange to read about such things while sitting in a stone tower, surrounded by the freezing Atlantic. You find yourself getting lost in the words, the world of the book becoming more real than the world outside the window. This is the magic of reading. It allows you to escape your surroundings and travel anywhere you want to go. You find yourself chuckling at a story about a traveler who tried to ride a llama and ended up being spit on. It is a small moment of humor that lightens your mood. You realize that you are not as lonely as you thought you would be. You have your books, your work, and the constant, shifting beauty of the sea. You feel a sense of peace settling over you. The afternoon sun is starting to move across the floor, and the room is warm and quiet. You can hear the bread dough rising, a soft, almost imperceptible sound of tiny air bubbles forming. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun soak into your skin. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. You are the keeper of the light, and your world is small, but it is complete. You think about the coming night and the long hours you will spend in the watch room, but you are not afraid. You are ready. You have mastered the rituals of the day, and you are prepared for the responsibilities of the night. You listen to the heartbeat of the lighthouse and the whisper of the waves, and you feel a deep sense of contentment. The golden rays of the afternoon sun are a reminder that you are part of something larger than yourself, a silent guardian in a world of water and light. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, you stand up and stretch. It is time to check on the bread. You peek under the cloth covering the bowl and see that the dough has doubled in size. You carefully shape it into a loaf and slide it into the small oven. Soon, the smell of baking bread fills the kitchen, a warm and comforting scent that reminds you of home. You wait patiently, watching the sky through the window as the colors begin to change. The bright blue of the afternoon is turning into a soft, dusty rose. You pull the bread out of the oven, its crust a beautiful golden brown. You break off a small piece and eat it while it is still steaming hot. It is the best thing you have ever tasted. You feel a sense of gratitude for this simple meal and for the quiet life you have chosen. You take one last look at the ocean before you head back up the stairs. The waves are turning dark, and the first stars are starting to appear in the eastern sky. It is time to light the lamp. You feel a sense of anticipation as you climb the iron steps. The ritual is beginning again, a cycle that has no end. You reach the lantern room and take out your matches. You strike one, and the small flame flares to life. You hold it to the wick, and the light grows, filling the glass prisms with a warm amber glow. You start the rotation, and the beams begin their nightly dance across the water. You are back at your post, a steady and reliable presence in a changing world. You watch the light for a moment, feeling its warmth on your face, and then you head down to the watch room to begin your vigil. The night is long, but you are not alone. You have the light, and the light is enough. The golden peace of the afternoon begins to fade, but not into the usual soft purple of a quiet evening. You notice a change in the air before you even look at the instruments. The atmosphere feels heavy, as if the sky is pressing down on the ocean with an invisible weight. You walk over to the small brass barometer hanging on the wall near the kitchen table. The needle has dropped significantly since you last checked it this morning. It is moving toward the word stormy, with a steady, alarming purpose. You tap the glass gently with your finger, and the needle jumps down even further. This is the first real test of your time on the rock. You look out the window and see that the horizon has disappeared into a wall of dark, bruised clouds. The sparkling blue water from earlier has turned into a churning mass of slate, gray peaks. The whitecaps are no longer like grazing sheep. They are more like jagged teeth biting at the air. You feel a small shiver go down your spine, but it is not from the cold. It is the realization that the great wide world is about to get very loud and very restless. You put on your heavy yellow oilskin coat and pull the hood over your head. You need to make sure everything on the lower gallery is secure before the wind truly arrives. You step outside, and the wind immediately tries to snatch the hat from your head. It is a raw, biting wind that tastes of deep water and old ice. You walk around the base of the tower, checking the heavy iron bolts that hold the storage shed to the rock. Everything is tight. You move your small pots of herbs into the sheltered lee of the tower, hoping they won't be washed away by the spray. The ocean is already starting to throw small splashes of water onto the lower ledge. You watch as a massive wave hits a nearby reef, sending a plume of white foam 50 feet into the air. It looks beautiful, but you know it represents a terrifying amount of energy. You head back inside and heave the heavy iron door shut. You drop the thick wooden bar into its slots, sealing yourself inside your stone cylinder. You are now in a world of your own. You can hear the wind beginning to whistle through the cracks in the masonry, a high-pitched sound that reminds you of a distant flute. If you thought your old apartment had a draft, try living in a giant straw standing in the middle of a hurricane. It is enough to make anyone miss the relative silence of a dusty basement. You climb the stairs toward the watch room, feeling the vibration of the tower change. When the wind hits the curved stone walls, the entire structure hums. It is a low-frequency vibration that you feel in the soles of your feet and the back of your neck. The storm arrives in full force just as the sun goes down. There is no sunset tonight, only a gradual transition from gray to total blackness. You are up in the lantern room, preparing to light the lamp. The wind is now a constant roar, like a freight train passing just outside the glass. Every few seconds, a massive gust hits the tower, and you feel the entire lighthouse sway. It is a very slight movement, perhaps only an inch or two, but it is enough to make your stomach do a little flip. Historians still argue whether the extreme vibrations of a lighthouse during a heavy storm can cause temporary auditory hallucinations or just a very bad headache. Some keepers in the past reported hearing voices in the wind or the sound of bells ringing deep underwater. You try to ignore the swaying and focus on your task. You strike a match, keeping your hand steady despite the movement of the tower. The flame catches the wick, and the light flares up, reflecting off the 100 prisms of the Fresnel lens. You start the rotation, and the beams of light shoot out into the chaos. They cut through the driving rain like bright swords. You see the raindrops streaking across the glass, illuminated by the light. It looks like millions of tiny silver needles flying through the air. You realize that you are now the most important point of reference in this part of the ocean. To any ship caught in this mess, you are the only thing that is staying still. You move down to the watch room to begin your vigil. You make a pot of very strong tea, the steam rising in the dim light of the small oil lamp on your desk. The tower shudders as a particularly large wave hits the base. You hear a dull, heavy vibration that feels like a giant hammer hitting a piece of metal. You know that waves in a storm like this can exert thousands of pounds of pressure per square foot. In 1851, a massive storm destroyed the first lighthouse at Minot's Ledge, which was built on iron piles. The two keepers were lost, and the only thing left was the twisted remains of the metal legs. Your lighthouse is made of solid interlocking stones, a design pioneered by John Smeaton for the Eddystone light. Each stone is carved into a dovetail shape, so that they lock together like a giant puzzle. The more the waves press against the stones, the tighter they hold. It is a comforting thought as you listen to the ocean trying to tear the tower down. You take a sip of your tea and try to read your book, but the noise makes it difficult to concentrate. The wind is screaming through the gallery railings, creating a sound like 1,000 angry birds. You imagine the birds that were flying around the tower earlier. They have all disappeared, seeking shelter in the crevices of the mainland cliffs. You are the only living thing out here, perched on a rock while the world dissolves into water and noise. Around midnight, the spray begins to reach the lantern room windows. even though you are over 100 feet above the sea. You hear the water hitting the glass with a sound like a handful of gravel. You have to go up and check the glass every hour. If the salt builds up too thick, it will dim the light. You climb the short ladder and look out into the darkness. For a split second, the beam of the light catches the crest of a wave as it passes the tower. You are shocked to see how high the water is climbing. The ocean is no longer a surface. It is a moving mountain range. You see white foam swirling in the air, caught in the updrafts created by the tower. You notice a quirky tidbit in your memory about a keeper who once found a live sea bass on the outdoor gallery after a storm. The fish had been carried up by a massive plume of spray and dropped right on the walkway. You look at the iron door leading to the gallery and decide that you definitely won't be going out there to look for any free dinner tonight. The fresh air out there would be more like a bucket of salt water delivered directly to your face at 60 miles per hour. You check the lamp and the clockwork. Everything is running smoothly. The lens continues its steady, hypnotic spin, oblivious to the war going on outside. You feel a deep sense of respect for the machine. It doesn't care about the wind or the waves. It just does what it was built to do. You return to your chair and wrap a wool blanket around your shoulders. The temperature inside the tower has dropped, and the stone walls feel cold to the touch. You think about the sailors who might be out there. You hope they are far away from the coast, riding out the storm in the deep water. You imagine the captain of a small schooner looking through his glass, searching for your flash. When he sees it, he will know exactly where he is. He will be able to steer his ship away from the hidden rocks that could tear the hull apart. You are a silent partner in his struggle to survive. You don't know his name, and he doesn't know yours, but you are connected by the light. This sense of purpose helps to push away the fear. You are not just a lonely person in a cold tower, you are a guardian. You think about the mainstream historical fact that lighthouses like this one were often the most expensive and difficult engineering projects of their time. Governments spent fortunes to build them because a single shipwreck could cost more than the entire tower. You are sitting on top of a very expensive piece of insurance. You decide to have a little joke with yourself. You tell yourself that if you survive this, you should ask for a raise. But then you remember that your boss is a government committee that probably thinks. Excitement is its own reward. The storm peaks around 3 in the morning. The noise is so loud now that you have to shout just to hear yourself think. The tower is swaying more noticeably, and you see the water in your teacup rippling with every hit. You decide to stay in the lantern room for a while, just to be sure nothing breaks. The glass is holding, but you can see it flexing slightly under the pressure of the wind. These panes of glass are over an inch thick, but even they have their limits. You think about the keepers of the past who had to stand in this room when the glass actually shattered. They would have to use wooden boards and canvas to try and cover the hole while the wind and rain poured in. You hope it doesn't come to that. You watch the rotation of the lens and notice that the clockwork is slowing down slightly. The cold is making the oil in the gears thicker. You take a small can of warm oil from the stove and carefully apply a few drops to the main bearings. You have to be careful not to get any on the glass. The gears respond immediately, and the ticking sound becomes steady again. You feel a sense of relief. You are keeping the heart of the lighthouse beating. You realize that your life has become very simple. You have one job, and as long as you do it, everything else doesn't matter. The rest of the world could be ending, but as long as this light is spinning, you are doing your duty. As the first hints of dawn begin to appear, the wind starts to lose its edge. It is still blowing hard, but the screaming sound has dropped to a low moan. The sky is still gray, but it is a lighter, softer shade. You look out the window and see that the waves are no longer hitting the tower with the same violence. They are still massive, but they are starting to smooth out into long, rolling swells. You see the shapes of the nearby rocks emerging from the foam. They look battered but unchanged. You feel a profound sense of exhaustion washing over you. You have been awake for over 20 hours, and the constant noise and vibration have worn you down. You wait until the sun is high enough to see the horizon before you stop the light. You turn off the lamp and watch the flame die away. You stop the rotation and apply the brake. The silence that follows is almost overwhelming. After hours of roaring wind and crashing waves, the quiet of the tower feels heavy. You can hear your own breathing and the soft ticking of your watch. You have survived your first great storm. You wrap the linen cover around the lens, feeling the warmth of the glass beneath your fingers. It feels like a living thing that is finally getting a chance to rest. You head down the stairs, and your legs feel like lead. Every step is a struggle. You reach the kitchen and see that a small amount of water has managed to seep under the door. You take a mop and clean it up, not wanting the salt to damage the wood. You are too tired to make a real breakfast, so you just eat a piece of the bread you baked yesterday and drink a glass of water. The bread is a bit dry now, but it still tastes wonderful. You look out the kitchen window and see the ocean. It is still angry, but the danger has passed. You see a few gulls returning to the rock, their white wings bright against the gray sky. They look like they are checking to see if you are still there. You wave a hand at them. Even though they can't see you, you feel a strange sense of kinship with the birds. You both survived the night. You climb up to your bedroom and fall onto the bed without even taking off your boots. You are asleep before your head hits the pillow. Your dreams are filled with the sound of the wind and the sight of white foam, but you feel safe. You know that the tower is solid and that the light will be ready for the next night. You have proven yourself to the sea, and the sea has let you stay. When you wake up late in the afternoon, the world is transformed. The sun is shining, and the sky is a brilliant, clear blue. The wind has dropped to a gentle breeze, and the ocean is a deep, calm turquoise. If you didn't see the piles of kelp and driftwood scattered across the rocks below, you would never know a storm had happened at all. You feel a bit stiff and sore, but your mind is clear. You head down to the storage room to check on your supplies. A few of the oil barrels shifted during the storm, but nothing is leaking. You spend an hour reorganizing the shelves and sweeping away the dust that was shaken loose from the walls. You find yourself moving with a new sense of confidence. You are no longer a newcomer to this rock. You are a veteran. You know what the ocean can do, and you know that you can handle it. You think about the letters you want to write to your family. You want to tell them about the way the tower sways and the sound of the waves. But you realize that words can't really capture the experience. You have to live it to understand it. You decide to just tell them that you are well and that the light is burning bright. You spend the rest of the day cleaning the salt off the lantern room windows. It is a big job, but you enjoy the feeling of the sun on your back as you work on the gallery. You use a bucket of fresh water and a long-handled squeegee to wash away the white crust. As the glass becomes clear, you see the world opening up again. You can see for miles in every direction. You see a small fishing boat in the distance. Its sails white and full. You wonder if they saw your light last night. You like to think that they did. You finish the windows and take a moment to just sit on the gallery and watch the water. The rhythm of the waves is back to a gentle wash. A soothing sound that makes you feel sleepy again. You realize that this is the secret of the lighthouse. It is a place of extremes. You have the total chaos of the storm and the perfect peace of the calm. You have the intense labor of the maintenance and the long, quiet hours of the watch. It is a life of balance. You feel a deep sense of contentment as you watch the sun begin its descent. The cycle is starting again, and you are ready for it. You head back inside to prepare your dinner, feeling the solid stone of the tower around you. You are the keeper of the light, and this rock is your home. You listen to the soft hiss of the stove and the distant call of a gull, and you know that you are exactly where you belong. The solitude no longer feels like a burden. It feels like a gift. You have the time to think, the time to work, and the time to just be. You are part of the history of the sea, and that is a beautiful thing. The morning after the storm brings a sky so clear it looks like it has been scrubbed clean by the wind. You stand on the outdoor gallery, the iron railing cold beneath your palms, and squint against the brilliant reflection of the sun on the water. The ocean is still breathing deeply, long and heavy swells rolling in from the deep Atlantic, but the violence of the previous night has vanished. You find yourself scanning the horizon with a new kind of intensity. Today is the day, according to the calendar hanging in the kitchen. And assuming the storm didn't blow the entire world off course, the supply tender is due to arrive. You feel a flutter of anticipation in your chest that is almost like stage fright. It has been weeks since you saw another human face or heard a voice that wasn't the echo of your own thoughts. You realize that you have started talking to the giant glass lens during your cleaning shifts, giving it little words of encouragement as you polish away the salt. You hope that when the boat arrives, you remember how to speak to actual people without accidentally asking them if they need more oil for their prisms. You go back inside and begin the frantic ritual of the pre-arrival polish. Even though the tower is already spotless, you find yourself wiping down the kitchen table for the 10th time. You want everything to be perfect for the men from the tender. These ships, known as lighthouse tenders, were the unsung heroes of the sea. Starting in the mid-1800s, ships with names like the Daffodil, the Lilac, and the Fern spent their days navigating the most dangerous waters just to bring kerosene, coal, and kindness to people like you. They were floating warehouses, moving through the fog and the rocks to make sure the lights never went out. You check your reflection in the polished brass of the lamp base. Your hair is a bit long, and your skin has a permanent glow from the salt air. But you look like a keeper. You feel a sense of pride in your uniform, even if the only person who sees it most days is a stray seagull with a judgmental expression. You decide to tidy up your small collection of books, lining them up by height. It is a small thing, but in a world where you have so little control over the elements, having a straight line of book spines feels like a major victory for civilization. Around mid-morning you see it. A thin, dark smudge of coal smoke appears on the horizon, slowly growing into the silhouette of a sturdy, black-hulled steamship. You grab the binoculars and head back out to the gallery. It is the Arbutus, the tender assigned to this district. You watch as she maneuvers carefully toward the rock, her engine working hard against the lingering swells. The captain of a tender has one of the hardest jobs in the world. He has to bring a large ship close enough to a jagged reef to offload heavy barrels without tearing the bottom out of his vessel. You see the crew on the deck moving with practiced efficiency. They are lowering a small whaleboat into the water. This is the taxi that will bring your supplies to the landing. You feel a sudden urge to jump up and down and wave your arms, but you restrain yourself. You want to look like a professional, a calm and collected guardian of the light, not a castaway who has forgotten how to behave in polite society. You walk down the long spiral staircase, your boots clicking on the iron steps in a rhythm that matches your heartbeat. By the time you reach the lower landing, the whaleboat is bobbing in the water just a few yards away. The sailors are skilled at this game. They wait for the boat to rise on a swell, and then they heave a heavy crate onto the stone ledge. You catch it and slide it back toward the safety of the tower door. This dance continues for an hour. It is hard, physical work, but you don't mind the sweat. You are receiving the building blocks of your survival. There are heavy barrels of kerosene that smell of sharp chemicals, sacks of coal that leave black smudges on your hands, and wooden crates filled with food. You see a crate marked fresh, and your mouth actually starts to water. Inside, you find a sack of potatoes that aren't shriveled, a dozen onions, a slab of salt pork, and a small basket of hard, red apples. You pick up an apple and just smell it for a moment. It smells like the earth, like a garden, like everything that is not the ocean. You imagine the crunch of the fruit, a contrast to the soft porridge and hard biscuits you have been living on. It is funny how a single piece of fruit can feel like a king's ransom when you have been away from the world for long enough. The last thing to come out of the boat is a small, waterproof canvas bag. This is the most precious cargo of all. It is the mail. You take the bag from the sailor's hand, and for a brief second, your fingers brush against his. It is a strange, electric sensation to touch another human being after so much solitude. He gives you a quick nod and a tired smile. He doesn't say anything, but that small gesture is enough. He understands the life you are living. The sailors on the tenders are the only ones who truly see the keepers in their natural habitat. They see the loneliness and the hard work, and they bring the only connection to the mainland that matters. The boat pulls away, heading back to the Arbutus. You stand on the rock and watch the ship turn around. You see the white foam of her wake and the steady pulse of her engine. You watch until she is once again just a smudge of smoke on the horizon. The silence returns to the rock, but it feels different now. It is no longer an empty silence. It is filled with the presence of the things you just received. You have fresh food, fuel for the light, and a bag full of words. You carry the supplies into the tower, moving one crate at a time. It takes most of the afternoon to get everything organized in the storage room. You handle the kerosene barrels with great care. They are the lifeblood of the station. Without them, the light dies, and your purpose vanishes. You stack the coal in the bin, the dark lumps clicking together like pieces of heavy glass. Finally, you take the mail bag and the basket of apples up to the kitchen. You sit at the table, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window, and carefully untie the drawstring of the bag. You feel a bit like a child at Christmas, even though you know most of the contents will be official documents and old newspapers. You find a stack of papers from the city, several weeks old but still full of news that is new to you. You see headlines about politics, theater, and fashion. It feels like reading about a different planet. Do people really care about the length of a skirt or the price of a theater ticket? Here, the only fashion that matters is whether your wool socks are dry, and the only theater is the way the clouds change color at sunset. You find yourself chuckling at the advertisements for miracle tonics and new-fangled vacuum cleaners. You imagine trying to use a vacuum cleaner on a stone floor covered in sea salt. It would probably give up and throw itself into the ocean out of pure frustration. At the bottom of the bag, you find the letters. There are 3 of them, their envelopes slightly crinkled from the journey. You recognize the handwriting on the first one immediately. It is from your sister. Her script is loopy and elegant, a contrast to the functional, blocky handwriting of the Lighthouse service records. You open it carefully, trying not to tear the paper. As you read her words, you can almost hear her voice. She tells you about the garden at home, how the roses are finally blooming, and how the neighbor's cat has decided to move into her potting shed. She tells you about a new recipe for blackberry jam she tried, and how she wishes she could send you a jar. You find your eyes getting a little misty. It isn't sadness, exactly. It is just the weight of being remembered. In the vastness of the Atlantic, on this tiny tooth of rock, it is easy to feel like you have faded out of the world's memory. But here is the proof that you still exist in someone's heart. You read the letter twice, savoring every mundane detail. To your sister, the cat in the shed is a small thing. To you, it is a window into a world where things are soft and green and peaceful. Historians still argue whether the extreme isolation of offshore stations like this one created a unique subculture of maritime workers who weren't actually sailors. You live on the water, but you never go anywhere. You navigate by staying still. It is a psychological paradox that would make a modern therapist scratch their head and reach for a notebook. You are a land dweller living in a sea world, a stationary traveler. You pick up the second letter. This one is from an old friend who moved to the city to work in a bank. He writes about the noise, the crowds, and the constant rush of life. He says he envies your quiet life and imagines you sitting on the rocks like a philosopher, contemplating the mysteries of the universe. You laugh out loud at that. You think about your philosophical morning spent scrubbing bird droppings off the gallery and wrestling with a heavy coal sack. You wonder if he would still envy you if he had to climb 200 steps every time he wanted a cup of tea. People on the mainland have a very romanticized view of lighthouses. They see the poetic image of the lone beacon in the night. But they don't see the grease under your fingernails or the way your knees ache after a long shift. Still, you don't correct him in your mind. You like that he thinks of you this way. It makes the job feel a bit more grand than it sometimes is. The third letter is a bit different. It is from a former keeper who used to serve at this very station. He heard you were taking over and wanted to share a few tips. He tells you about the third step from the top that always squeaks in the humidity, and the best way to keep the stove from smoking when the wind is from the northeast. He mentions a quirky tidbit about a secret hiding spot he carved under one of the floorboards in the watch room, where he used to keep a stash of prohibited peppermint candies. You find yourself smiling at the thought of this man, years ago, sneaking a candy in the middle of the night while watching the lens spin. It makes you feel like you are part of a secret society. You are not just a government employee, you are the latest in a long line of ghosts who have haunted this tower. You realize that you will probably leave your own marks here, your own little secrets for the next person to find. Maybe you'll leave a note behind a loose stone or a small drawing on the underside of a shelf. It is a way of saying, I was here, I did my duty, I was alive. You spend the next few hours reading the newspapers. You find yourself getting caught up in a serialized story in the back of one of the papers. It is a dramatic tale of a lost heiress and a mysterious masked man. It is completely ridiculous, but you find yourself wanting to know what happens next. Then you realize that the next installment is in the next newspaper, which won't arrive for another month. You groan and toss the paper onto the table. This is the true cruelty of the supply tender. It gives you just enough of the world to make you want more, then it sails away and leaves you with the cliffhanger. You decide to make yourself a celebration dinner with your new supplies. You peel a few of the fresh potatoes and boil them until they are soft and fluffy. You fry a thick slice of the salt pork, the fat sizzling and popping in the pan. The smell is incredible. It is the smell of a real kitchen, a real home. You sit down to eat, and for a moment, you don't even look at the ocean. You just focus on the taste of the food, the saltiness of the pork, the creaminess of the potatoes, the sharp bite of the onions. It is a sensory explosion after weeks of bland rations. You realize that you have been living in a gray world, and the supply boat just brought the color back. As you eat, you think about the traveling library. Again, the crew of the Arbutus took away the old box of books and left a new one in the storage room. You can't wait to see what is inside. You hope there is some history, maybe a book about the ancient beacons of the Mediterranean, or a thick novel you can lose yourself in for a week. You think about the mainstream historical fact that the United States Lighthouse Service was one of the first government agencies to provide structured libraries for its employees. They understood that a board keeper was a dangerous keeper. If your mind has nothing to focus on, it starts to turn inward, and that is when the lighthouse blues set in. You have to keep your brain as busy as your hands. You finish your dinner and clean your plate with a piece of bread, not wanting to waste a single drop of the pork fat. You feel full and satisfied a rare feeling in this place. You take one of the red apples and polish it on your sleeve until it shines. You take a bite, and the sweetness is almost overwhelming. It is the taste of summer preserved in a small, round fruit. You decide to save the rest of the apples, rationing them out over the next week so you can make the feeling last as long as possible. The sun is starting to set, and the sky is a riot of orange and purple. You head up to the watchroom to begin your nightly routine. You feel a new sense of energy. The arrival of the boat has refreshed you, reminding you that you are part of a larger mission. You are the link between the people who write the letters and the sailors who read the light. You are a vital part of the world's machinery, even if you are tucked away on a remote gear. You light the lamp, the flame steady and bright. You start the rotation, and the beams of light begin their long reach across the darkening water. You sit at your desk and open the logbook. You write down the arrival of the arbutus and the list of supplies received. Then you hesitate for a moment. Usually, the logbook is strictly for facts. But tonight, you add a small note in the margin. Received letters from home. All is well. It is a tiny rebellion against the cold, clinical nature of the service regulations. It is a reminder that there is a human being behind the pen. You settle into your chair and pick up your sister's letter one more time. You find a detail you missed before. She mentioned that she is thinking of buying a new hat for the summer social. You find yourself wondering what color it will be. You imagine her walking down a sun-drenched street, her hat shielding her eyes from the glare. You hope it is a bright, cheerful color. You realize that your mind is now populated with new images and new ideas. The letters have given you fresh material for your thoughts. You won't just be thinking about the mercury levels or the wick height tonight. You'll be thinking about roses, blackberry jam, and summer hats. It is a gift of mental space, a way to escape the stone walls without ever leaving your chair. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for the people who took the time to write. They have no idea how much their words mean. To them, it was just a few minutes with a pen and paper. To you, it is a lifeline that keeps you from drifting away into the gray mist of the sea. The night is quiet and the sea is calm. The lighthouse hums with its familiar, rhythmic pulse. You look out the window at the stars, which are starting to pop out against the black velvet of the sky. You feel a sense of peace that you haven't felt in a long time. The storm is over, the supplies are in, and you have heard from the people you love. You are the keeper of the light, and tonight, the world feels small and manageable. You watch the light sweep across the water, a golden finger pointing toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, a ship is seeing that light and knowing they are on the right track. And somewhere on the mainland, your sister is probably sleeping, unaware that her words are keeping a lonely man company on a cold rock in the middle of the ocean. You lean back in your chair and close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the small oil lamp on your desk seep into your bones. You are tired, but it is a good kind of tired. You have done your work, you have been fed, and you have been remembered. That is more than most people can say at the end of the day. You listen to the heartbeat of the lighthouse and the gentle wash of the waves, and you feel a deep, sleepy contentment. You are right where you belong, standing watch on the edge of the world, a silent guardian in a universe of water and light. The morning air is crisp and carries the sharp, clean scent of the open ocean as you step out onto the lower stone gallery. The arrival of the supply boat yesterday has left you feeling wealthy. Your pantry stocked with fresh potatoes and the heavy weight of letters resting in your pocket like a secret treasure. You take a deep breath, feeling the cool moisture of the morning mist on your skin. The island, this tiny fortress of granite, feels different today. It feels less like a prison and more like a private kingdom. You look down at the base of the tower, where the waves are gently licking at the dark, wet stones. The tide is going out, revealing a hidden world that is usually buried beneath the churning white foam. You decide that the brass can wait for an hour. Today, you are going to explore the edges of your world and visit your only permanent neighbors. You slowly descend the iron ladder, your boots finding firm purchase on the rungs that have finally dried after the storm. You reach the solid rock and feel a sense of freedom. Usually your movements are vertical, confined to the circle of the stairs. Now, you can move horizontally, stretching your legs across the rugged expanse of the shore. As you walk toward the tide pools, you notice a familiar figure perched on a high ridge of stone. It is the large herring gull you have started to call Barnaby. He is a magnificent creature with a snowy white chest and wings the color of a storm cloud. He watches you with a sharp, intelligent yellow eye, tilting his head as if he is deciding whether you are a friend or a potential source of crackers. You have spent many hours watching him from the lantern room, and you like to think there is a mutual respect between you. You are both guardians of this rock, after all. You move slowly, not wanting to startle him, and find a flat spot to sit near a deep pool of water trapped in a hollow of the granite. Barnaby gives a low, guttural croak but doesn't fly away. He simply adjusts his feathers, which look perfectly preened despite the salt spray. You realize that while you have your books and your letters to keep you company, the birds have their own complex social lives happening right before your eyes. They argue, they play, and they watch the weather with a precision that would make a seasoned sailor jealous. You lean over the edge of the tide pool and look into the clear, still water. It is like looking into a miniature universe. The floor of the pool is covered in bright green sea lettuce and delicate red algae that sways gently even though there is no current. You see a small crab, no bigger than a coin, scuttling sideways across a patch of pink coralline algae. It moves with a frantic, busy energy, its tiny claws searching for bits of food hidden in the crevices. You find yourself smiling at its determination. To the crab, this tiny pool is its whole world, a vast landscape of forests and caves. You feel a strange sense of kinship with the little creature. You are both living in small, self-contained worlds, surrounded by a much larger and more dangerous ocean. You reach down and touch the surface of the water. It is shockingly cold, a reminder that the Atlantic never truly warms up, even in the height of summer. You notice a cluster of barnacles attached to the side of the rock. They look like tiny white volcanoes, their doors tightly shut to keep the moisture inside while the tide is out. Historians still argue whether the extreme isolation of lighthouse life led to a unique maritime dialect among keepers, or if the constant reading of government-issued books kept their speech more formal than that of the average sailor. You find yourself wondering if you are starting to sound like a book yourself, or if you are simply losing the habit of noise altogether. You talk to the crab for a moment, describing the taste of the fresh apple you had for breakfast. The crab does not seem impressed, but it feels good to use your voice. You realize that in the absence of humans, you have started to personify everything around you. The wind has a personality, the waves have a mood, and even the rust on the railings seems like a stubborn old man you have to argue with every morning. You joke to yourself that if the crab starts answering back in a salty sea dog accent, it might be time to ask the supply boat captain for a very long vacation. You spend some time watching the anemones, their soft tentacles waving like tiny fingers as they wait for the tide to return. They look like delicate flowers, but you know they are efficient hunters, ready to snag any unwary shrimp that swims too close. You stand up and walk further along the edge of the rock, toward the northern point, where the surf is always a bit louder. This is where the puffins gather. You call them sea parrots because of their bright, triangular beaks and their tuxedo-like feathers. They are much smaller than you expect, and they move with a comical, waddling gait that makes them look like tiny, very serious waiters who have forgotten their tables. You watch them dive into the water, disappearing for what feels like a long time before popping back up like corks, often with a silver string of tiny sand eels hanging from their beaks. You think about the mainstream historical fact that in the 19th century, lighthouse keepers were often required by the government to keep detailed meteorological journals. They weren't just lighting lamps. They were the frontline researchers for bird migration patterns and weather science. Organizations like the early Audubon Society relied on the observations of lonely keepers to understand where the birds went in the winter. You feel a sense of pride, knowing that your scribbled notes in the logbook about the first puffin sighting of the season are part of a much larger scientific effort. You are a scientist of the shoreline, a witness to the secret rhythms of the wild. While you are watching the puffins, you notice a dark shape bobbing in the swells just offshore. At first, you think it is a piece of driftwood, but then it turns and you see two large, dark eyes and a set of long, sensitive whiskers. It is a harbor seal. It watches you with a curious, almost dog-like expression. You have heard a quirky tidbit about a keeper in Maine who allegedly taught a local seal to recognize his whistle, and the animal would follow him around the base of the tower like a faithful pet. You decide to try a soft whistle of your own. The seal tilts its head, its nostrils flaring as it scents the air. It doesn't come closer, but it doesn't swim away either. It simply floats there, riding the waves with an effortless grace that you find yourself envying. You think about how difficult it is for you to move through this environment with your heavy boots and your fragile balance. While the seal is perfectly at home, you feel like a guest who has been allowed to sit in the lobby of a very grand hotel. But the seal is the one who owns the penthouse. You watch it dive, its sleek body disappearing into the dark water without making a single splash. The sun is higher now, and the heat of the day is starting to bake the salt on the rocks, creating a white, sparkling crust. You find a small cave, like overhang, and sit in the shade for a moment. You think about the bird strikes that happen at the lantern room on foggy nights, The birds are often confused by the powerful beam of light. They fly toward it, thinking it is a hole in the clouds, or perhaps a star to guide them, and they hit the thick glass with a dull, heavy vibration. Historians still argue whether the introduction of red, tinted glass in some lighthouses was primarily for navigational signaling, or if it was an early attempt to reduce the number of bird fatalities. You have spent many mornings on the gallery picking up stunned birds and keeping them in a small wooden box until they are strong enough to fly again. It is a heartbreaking part of the job, but it makes you feel even more protective of your feathered neighbors. You look at Barnaby, who has followed you down the coast and is now perched on a nearby boulder. He lets out a loud, ringing cry that echoes off the stone walls of the lighthouse. It is a lonely sound, but also a defiant one. It says, "I am here, and this is my home." You realize that your relationship with these animals is the only social life you have, and in many ways, it is more honest than the life you left behind on the mainland. There is no small talk with a puffin. There are no social expectations with a seal. There is only the shared experience of surviving on a rock in the middle of a very big ocean. You think about how people in cities are constantly surrounded by others, but often feel more lonely than you do. You have the wind, the sea, and 1,000 tiny lives to observe. You find yourself wondering what the birds think of you. Do they see you as a giant, slow, moving creature that provides a steady, reliable light? Or are you just another part of the landscape, like a tree that happens to wear a yellow coat? You decide that you like being part of the landscape. It takes the pressure off. You don't have to be anything special out here. You just have to be steady. You joke to yourself that your social calendar is quite full. Lunch with the crabs at 1, a meeting with the puffins at 2, and a silent staring contest with the seal at 3. It is a busy life, indeed. As the tide begins to turn, the water starts to creep back into the pools. You watch as the anemones stretch their tentacles wider, sensing the return of the fresh, oxygen-rich water. The barnacles open their tiny doors and start to sweep the water for microscopic bits of food. The world is waking up again. You stand up and start to make your way back toward the tower. You move carefully, mindful of the slippery seaweed and the sharp edges of the barnacles. You feel a sense of physical tiredness that is very different from the mental exhaustion of the mainland. This is a tiredness of the muscles and the bones, a healthy feeling that comes from moving through the real world. You reach the base of the lighthouse and look up. The tower looks massive from this angle, a white giant standing guard over the reef. You feel a sense of gratitude for the stone. It is the only thing that stands between you and the raw power of the sea. You begin the climb back up the ladder, your hands finding the familiar cold metal. When you reach the lower gallery, you take one last look at the shore. The tide has already covered the pool where you saw the crab. The little universe is now part of the great Atlantic once again. You see Barnaby take flight, his wings spreading wide as he catches an updraft. He soars higher and higher, becoming a tiny white speck against the blue of the sky. You feel a sense of peace. You have spent the morning in the company of the wild, and it has reminded you that you are not alone. You belong to this place. You head inside and start the long climb up the spiral stairs. The interior of the tower feels cool and dim after the bright sunlight of the shore. You reach the kitchen and find that the fire in the stove has gone out. You don't mind. You take one of your fresh potatoes and start to peel it, the thin skin curling away in a single, continuous strip. You think about the letters in your pocket and decide to save them for the evening, a reward for the work you still have to do. You climb to the lantern room and begin your daily cleaning. The glass prisms are dusty from the salt spray that the wind carried up during the night. You take your cloth and begin the rhythmic motion of polishing. As you work, you look out the windows. From this height, the ocean looks different again. You can see the patterns of the currents and the way the light changes as it moves over the deep water. You see a small pod of dolphins jumping in the distance, their silver bodies flashing in the sun. They look like they are playing a game of leapfrog with the waves. You realize that the ocean is full of life, more life than you could ever imagine. You are just a small part of it, an observer perched on a high stool. You think about the wicked inspectors again and wonder if they ever took the time to look at the dolphins. Probably not. They were too busy looking for dust. You decide that you will never be a wicked keeper. You will be a keeper who knows the name of the gulls and the habits of the seals. You will be a keeper who listens to the story the ocean is trying to tell. The afternoon passes slowly and quietly. You finish the lens and spend some time polishing the brass floor of the lantern room. You rub the metal until you can see the reflection of the clouds moving across the sky. It is hard work, but it is satisfying. You think about the history of this light and all the keepers who have looked out these same windows. Did they see the same gulls? Did they name the same seals? You feel like you are part of a long, unbroken conversation with the sea. You are the one who is currently holding the microphone, but the audience has been the same for centuries. You realize that the solitude of the lighthouse is not about being away from people. It is about being close to the earth. It is about stripping away the noise of the world and listening to the things that really matter. The wind, the tide, the cycle of the light. These are the things that ground you. These are the things that make you feel whole. As the sun begins to set, you head down to the watchroom. You take out your letters and read them again, the words feeling even more precious now that you have spent the day in the company of the wild. You think about your sister and her blackberry jam, and you imagine the smell of the roses in her garden. You think about your friend in the city and his busy, noisy life. You don't envy him anymore. You have everything you need right here. You have your work, your neighbors, and the constant, shifting beauty of the sea. You feel a deep sense of contentment. You are the keeper of the light, and this rock is your home. You listen to the soft hiss of the gas and the distant call of a gull, and you know that you are exactly where you belong. The solitude no longer feels like a burden. It feels like a gift. You have the time to think, the time to work, and the time to just be. You are part of the history of the sea, and that is a beautiful thing. You light the lamp, the flame steady and bright. You start the rotation, and the beams of light begin their nightly dance across the water. You sit at your desk and open the logbook. You write down the weather, the sightings of the birds, and the arrival of the harbor seal. You add a small note in the margin. The puffins are back in the northern point. The world is turning as it should. It is a record of your day. A way to prove that you are paying attention. You settle into your chair and close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the lamp seep into your bones. You are tired, but it is a good kind of tired. You have done your work. You have seen your neighbors, and you have been part of the rhythm of the world. You listen to the heartbeat of the lighthouse and the gentle wash of the waves, and you feel a deep, sleepy contentment. You are right where you belong, standing watch on the edge of the world, a silent guardian in a universe of water and light. The shadows in the watch room grow long as the last of the daylight fades. You watch the stars begin to flicker into existence, one by one. You think about how the sailors on the ancient Pharos of Alexandria must have felt looking at these same stars. They were guided by the same constellations, and they felt the same awe at the vastness of the night. You realize that you are part of a human tradition that spans thousands of years. We have always wanted to reach out into the darkness and say, "Here is the way. Here is home." You feel a sense of responsibility to those ancient keepers. You are carrying their torch, literally and figuratively. You take a sip of your cool tea and lean back, watching the flash of the light against the dark glass. 1, 2, 3. It is a steady, reliable rhythm. It is the heartbeat of the coast. You feel your own heart slowing down to match it. You are safe. You are warm. You are part of the light, and the light is part of you. The clock on the wall of the watch room ticks with a slow, heavy rhythm that seems to match the beating of your own heart. It is 2 o'clock in the morning, the hour when the world feels most thin, as if the veil between the present and the past has been worn away by the salt and the wind. You sit in your wooden chair, your feet resting on the rungs, and watch the steady, sweeping beam of the light through the high window. The tower is quiet tonight, the ocean below having settled into a series of long, rhythmic sighs. You reach out and touch the cover of the history book you pulled from the library box earlier today. The leather is old and cracked, smelling of cedar and ancient dust. As you open the pages, the yellowed paper feels like dry skin beneath your fingers. You are not just a keeper of a modern iron and stone tower. You are a link in a chain that stretches back over 2,000 years. You find yourself drifting into a daydream, imagining the very first people who stood watch over the dark waters, long before kerosene and glass prisms were ever imagined. Your mind travels back to the year 280 BC, to the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. You imagine a tower so massive it would make your own lighthouse look like a child's toy. This was the Pharos of Alexandria, built on a small island off the coast of Egypt. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, standing over 300 feet tall. You picture the workers carrying massive bundles of resinous wood up a wide, spiraling ramp that was broad enough for 2-pack animals to pass each other. There were no stairs here, only a gradual incline that led toward the clouds. At the very top, a great fire burned every night, a roaring bonfire that could be seen for 30 miles across the sea. Historians still argue whether the Pharos of Alexandria used a massive bronze mirror to reflect sunlight by day, or if it was strictly a nighttime beacon powered by wood and resin. You imagine the heat of that fire, the way the orange light must have danced on the white marble walls of the tower, casting long, flickering shadows across the harbor. It was a beacon for the greatest library in the world, a signal fire for the center of human knowledge. You chuckle softly to yourself as you think about the ancient keepers. If you think you're wicked, inspectors are tough with their white glove tests. Imagine having to answer to a pharaoh who thinks a dim light is a personal insult to his divinity. Those ancient keepers probably didn't have to worry about polishing brass, but they likely spent their entire lives covered in soot and wood ash. They were the original guardians, the ones who first understood that a light in the darkness is more than just a tool. It is a promise. You look at your own clean, steady flame and feel a sense of luxury. You have the benefit of centuries of trial and error. You have the argand lamp invented in 1780, which used a circular wick and a glass chimney to create a much brighter and steadier light than any open fire could ever produce. You think about the mess of those old wood fires, the smoke, the sparks, the constant labor of feeding the flames. It makes your nightly task of winding the weights and trimming the wicks seem like a walk in a quiet park. As you flip the pages of the book, you see a drawing of a Roman lighthouse, or Pharos, like the one built at Dover in England during the 1st century. It is a squat, octagonal tower made of flint and tufa, standing on the edge of a high cliff. You find a quirky tidbit in the text that mentions the Roman lighthouse at Dover was so well built that it survived for centuries and was eventually used as a bell tower for a nearby church. You imagine the Roman soldiers standing on the gallery, wrapped in thick wool cloaks to shield them from the damp British mist. They would have burned coal in large iron baskets called chaffers. Coal was a significant improvement over wood, but it was a nightmare to maintain. The smoke was thick and black, coating everything in a layer of grime, and the light was often obscured by the very fuel that created it. You imagine the keepers having to constantly stir the coals with long iron pikes to keep the fire from choking on its own ash. It was a dirty, exhausting job that left the keepers looking like miners who had accidentally climbed a mountain. The history of the light is a history of fuel and frustration. You think about the medieval era, when the great lighthouses of the ancient world had fallen into ruin and the coastlines became dark and dangerous. During this time, the task of keeping the lights often fell to monks and hermits. They lived in small stone cells on the edges of lonely cliffs, tending small fires in exchange for the prayers of the sailors. These men were the true ancestors of your solitude. They understood the silence of the rock and the long hours of the night better than anyone. They didn't have logbooks or government regulations. They only had their faith and the knowledge that their small fire might prevent a tragedy. You imagine a monk kneeling in the cold wind, shielding a tiny flame with his hands, his prayers lost in the roar of the surf. There is something deeply peaceful about the thought. It reminds you that your job has a spiritual dimension, a connection to the fundamental human desire to help those who are lost. You turn your attention to the 18th century, the era of the great lighthouse builders. You read about Henry Winstanley, who built the first lighthouse on the Eddystone Rocks in 1698. It was a strange, ornate wooden tower that looked more like a Chinese pagoda than a maritime beacon. Winstanley was so confident in his design that he stayed in the tower during a massive storm in 1703, only to have the entire structure swept away by the waves, taking him with it. This story makes you appreciate the solid, interlocking stones of your own tower even more. You think about John Smeaton, who rebuilt the Eddystone Light in 1759 using a revolutionary design inspired by the trunk of an oak tree. He used hydraulic lime, a type of cement that actually sets underwater, to lock the stones together. This was a mainstream historical fact that changed engineering forever. Smeaton's tower stood for over 100 years, proving that human ingenuity could finally stand up to the raw power of the Atlantic. You feel the cold stone of the wall beside you, and think about the generations of builders who gave their lives to make sure you could sit here in safety tonight. You find yourself smiling at a story about the Stevenson family in Scotland. They were a dynasty of lighthouse engineers who built most of the great lights around the Scottish coast. Robert Louis Stevenson, the famous author of Treasure Island, was supposed to follow in the family business, but chose to write stories instead. You wonder if his time spent on those remote, wave-washed rocks influenced his tales of pirates and hidden treasures. Perhaps the long hours of silence provided the space for his imagination to grow. You like the idea that lighthouses are not just for saving ships, but for nurturing stories. Every keeper is a storyteller, even if the only person they tell their stories to is the sea. You joke to yourself that if you ever decide to write a book, you'll have to include a chapter on the Great War of the Dust Bunnies that you fight every morning in the kitchen. It might not be as exciting as a pirate raid, but it certainly feels like a life and death struggle some days. The light continues its steady, hypnotic rotation. You look up at the ceiling and listen to the ticking of the clockwork. This mechanism is a direct descendant of the giant clocks found in European cathedrals. It is a world of gears and weights, a physical representation of the order you are maintaining in a chaotic world. You think about the transition from coal to oil, and then from whale oil to kerosene. Each step was a move toward a cleaner, more efficient light. In the early 1800s, keepers used sperm oil, taken from the heads of sperm whales. It was the highest quality oil available, but it was incredibly expensive and smelled like a very old, very unhappy fish market. You are glad you live in the age of kerosene. It is a bit temperamental, but it is reliable and relatively clean. You realize that you are living at the peak of the golden age of lighthouses. Never before has the technology been so perfect, and yet you know that things are always changing. There are rumors of electric lights being tested in some of the larger harbor stations. You can't imagine a wire replacing the warm, living flame of your lamp, but you know that history doesn't stop for anyone. You think about the keepers who have occupied this very watchroom before you. You find their names written in the back of the old history book, scrawled in various styles of handwriting. Some are neat and precise, others are messy and rushed. You see the name of a keeper from 50 years ago, a man who served here for 30 years. He saw the transition from the old silver reflectors to the great Fresnel lens you polish today. You wonder what he thought when the giant glass beehive first arrived on the supply boat. Was he afraid of it? Or did he see it for the miracle it was? You feel like you are having a silent conversation with him. You are both guardians of the same light, separated only by the ticking of the clock. You imagine him sitting in this same chair, watching the same stars, and feeling the same sense of peace as the world outside grew quiet. You are never truly alone in a lighthouse. You are surrounded by the memories of those who came before. Historians still argue whether the extreme sense of duty felt by lighthouse keepers was a result of their military-like training, or if the job itself naturally attracted people who were looking for a higher purpose. You lean toward the latter. There is something about the light that demands the best of you. It is a constant, unwavering responsibility. You can't just decide to take a night off. You can't let the flame flicker or the lens slow down. The ocean doesn't take breaks, and neither can you. This sense of duty is what connects you to the Roman soldiers at Dover and the monks on their lonely cliffs. You are all part of the same mission. You are all saying no to the darkness. You find a strange comfort in this. In a world that often feels random and chaotic, your life has a very clear and important meaning. You are a steady point in a moving universe. You are the keeper of the promise. You pick up your pen and make a small note in the margin of the history book. You write down the date and your own name, adding it to the list of those who have stood watch here. It is a small act of vanity, perhaps, but it feels right. You are part of the story now. You think about the future keepers who will sit in this chair 50 or 100 years from now. Will they still use kerosene? Will they still wind the weights? Or will the tower be empty, the light controlled by some distant machine on the mainland? The thought makes you a little sad, but then you look at the beam of light sweeping across the water, and the feeling passes. The light is here now, and you are here to tend it. That is all that matters. The past is a long road of fire and stone, and the future is a mist on the horizon. You live in the present, in the golden circle of the lamp. You decide to make one last trip up to the lantern room before the dawn begins to break. The air is cold and fresh as you climb the ladder, and the light from the lens is blindingly bright up close. You check the oil level and trim the wick one last time, your movements practiced and sure. You look out the glass at the stars, which are starting to pale as the first hints of light appear in the east. You think about the Pharos of Alexandria one last time. It fell to earthquakes hundreds of years ago, its marble stones sinking into the harbor mud. But the idea of the Pharos lives on in every lighthouse in the world. Every time you light your lamp, you are rebuilding that ancient wonder. You are keeping the fire alive. You feel a deep sense of satisfaction as you descend back to the watch room. The night is almost over, and you have done your job well. You have kept the lineage unbroken. As you sit back down, you feel a heavy, comfortable tiredness washing over you. The history book is still open on your lap, but your eyes are starting to close. You think about the traveling library again and wonder what other stories are waiting for you in those boxes. There are thousands of years of human experience packed into those pages, and you have all the time in the world to explore them. You are a sailor of the mind, traveling through time without ever leaving your rock. You listen to the heartbeat of the lighthouse, that steady, metallic tick-tock that has guided you through the night. It is a soothing sound, a reminder that everything is as it should be. The world is turning, the light is spinning, and you are safe within your stone walls. You let your head rest against the back of the chair, your breathing slowing to match the rhythm of the waves. The first gray light of morning begins to seep through the window, turning the dark watchroom into a space of soft shadows. You watch the stars disappear, swallowed by the growing light of the sun. You feel a sense of completion. Another night has passed, and another day is beginning. You have stood your watch, just as the Romans did, just as the monks did, and just as the Stevensons did. You are a part of the history of the sea, and that is a beautiful thing. You close the history book and set it carefully on the desk. Your work for the night is done, but the light you have tended will continue to shine in the memories of the sailors who saw it. You stand up and stretch, feeling the strength in your muscles and the peace in your heart. You are the keeper of the light, and you are ready for whatever the new day brings. The morning sun rises one last time over the jagged horizon, casting a long, golden shadow from your stone tower across the restless face of the Atlantic. You stand on the gallery, your hands tucked into the pockets of your heavy wool coat, watching the transition from the deep indigo of night to the pale, milky blue of a calm morning. It has been many months since you first stepped onto this rock, and you realize that the person who arrived on that small supply boat is not quite the same person who stands here now. Your skin is tougher. Your eyes are more accustomed to searching the distance, and your mind has learned to settle into a rhythm that is dictated not by clocks or calendars, but by the rising of the sun and the turning of the tide. You look down at the base of the tower and see the familiar patterns of the waves, recognizing the way they break against the northern ledge. You have become a part of this landscape, a living element of the lighthouse itself. The tower is no longer just a building, it is a companion, a silent partner that has kept you safe while you kept it shining. You think back to those wicked inspectors you were so worried about at the start. You realize now that their obsession with cleanliness wasn't just about being mean. It was a way to maintain order in a place where the chaos of nature is always trying to push its way inside. If you let a single spot of rust take hold, the ocean wins a tiny victory. By keeping everything polished and perfect, you are asserting your own presence against the vast, impersonal power of the sea. You head inside and begin your final morning routine. You walk down the spiral stairs, and when you reach the third step from the top, you listen for that familiar squeak the old keeper mentioned in his letter. You find yourself stepping on it deliberately, enjoying the small, predictable sound that has become a part of your daily soundtrack. In the kitchen, you move with a quiet efficiency that comes from long practice. You don't even have to look at the stove to know exactly how many shavings of wood you need to start the fire. You boil the water for your coffee and sit at the wooden table, looking at the empty spot where your fresh apples used to be. You finished the last one 3 days ago, savoring every bite, and while you miss the sweetness, you find that you are perfectly content with your simple bowl of porridge. You have learned that satisfaction comes not from having everything you want, but from fully appreciating what you have. You pick up the history book from the desk and place it back in the library box, ready for the next person to discover the stories of the Pharos and the Roman beacons. You think about how many minds have been expanded by these same pages, tucked away in the silence of the night. It is a quiet, intellectual chain of custody that spans decades. As you drink your coffee, You think about the mainstream historical fact that in 1939, the United States Lighthouse Service was officially merged into the Coast Guard. It marked the end of an era for civilian keepers and the beginning of a more military style of management. You wonder if the keepers who lived through that transition felt a sense of loss, or if they welcomed the new structure and support. Historians still argue whether this centralization was necessary for modernization, or if it stripped away the unique, rugged independence that defined the lighthouse service for over a century. You feel a bit like a ghost of that older era, a representative of a time when the light was a personal responsibility rather than a bureaucratic task. You take a certain pride in that. You aren't just an employee, you are a guardian. You have a quirky tidbit of your own to add to the station's lore. The memory of that morning you watched a pod of whales breached so close to the rock that you could hear the heavy, wet sound of their breathing over the roar of the surf. It is a detail that won't show up in any official report, but it is one of the most important things that happened during your stay. You climb the stairs to the lantern room for the final polishing. You move the chamois cloth over the glass prisms of the Fresnel lens, feeling the smooth, cold surface. You know every inch of this glass now. You know which prisms have a tiny, almost invisible chip from a storm 50 years ago, and which ones catch the light in a way that creates a rainbow on the floor at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning. You work slowly, not because you have to, but because you want to. This is your final act of service to the light. You realize that you will miss this meditation. There is something incredibly grounding about focusing all your attention on a single, clear task. In the world outside, things are complicated and messy. Here, things are simple. The glass must be clean, the brass must shine, and the light must burn. You think about the wickies, the nickname given to keepers because of their constant task of trimming the lamp wicks. You feel like you have earned that name. Your fingers are stained with oil, and your clothes smell of kerosene, but you feel a sense of purity that you never found in the city. You are a man of the light, and that light has cleared away a lot of the fog in your own mind. You move to the brass pedestal and give it one last rub with the polishing paste. The metal glows like a small sun in the center of the room. You look at the mercury trove and see your reflection in the silver liquid. You look older, perhaps, but also more settled. The restlessness that used to drive you has been replaced by a deep, quiet stillness. You think about the sailors who are out there right now, sleeping in their bunks or standing watch on their own decks. They don't know that you are leaving today. To them, the light will look exactly the same tonight as it did last night. That is the beauty of the job. You are a constant. You are the one thing they can rely on in a world of shifting winds and changing currents. You realize that this is what you will miss the most. The feeling of being useful in a way that truly matters. You aren't just making money or passing time. You are protecting life. It is a heavy responsibility, but it is also a light one, because it is so clearly defined. You step out onto the gallery and look toward the mainland. You can see the thin line of the coast, a dark smudge against the horizon. Somewhere over there, a boat is being prepared to come and get you. You feel a strange mix of emotions. You are looking forward to a fresh meal and a conversation with a friend, but you also feel a sense of grief. You are leaving your kingdom. You are stepping back into the noise and the crowds. You wonder if you will still be able to hear the silence of the rock when you are walking down a busy street. You hope that you can carry a piece of this stillness with you. You think about the ancient keepers again and wonder if they felt this same reluctance to leave their posts. Perhaps they too felt that the world outside was a bit too loud and a bit too fast. You watch a seagull glide past the tower, its wings motionless as it rides the wind. You realize that the bird doesn't have to worry about transitions or endings. It just is. You try to mimic that feeling, letting go of your worries about the future and just existing in the present moment. You head down to the watch room and pick up the logbook. You sit at the desk and open it to the final page. You record the morning weather, clear skies, calm seas, temperature rising. Then you stop. Usually, your entries are short and functional. But today, you want to say something more. You think about the next keeper, the one who will be stepping off the boat later today. You decide to leave him a message, just as the previous keeper left one for you. You don't write it in the logbook, which is a formal government document. Instead, you take a small scrap of paper and write a few words in a steady hand. You tell him about the squeaky step and the best time to watch the dolphins. You tell him that the solitude is not a weight, but a gift. You fold the paper and tuck it into the secret hiding spot under the floorboard that the old history book mentioned. It is a small connection, a bridge between the person you were and the person he will become. You feel a sense of closure as you slide the floorboard back into place. The circle is complete. The morning passes in a blur of small, final tasks. You pack your heavy wool coat and your few books into your canvas bags. You sweep the kitchen floor one last time, making sure not a single grain of dust remains for the inspector. You look around the small, curved rooms and realize how much you have come to love them. The bedroom with its thick blankets, the kitchen with its warm stove, the watch room with its view of the stars. These have been your world, and they have been enough. You think about the mainstream historical fact that lighthouse keeping was one of the few professions in the 19th century where women were often employed by the government, often taking over for their husbands or fathers. You think about those brave women standing on these same galleries, facing the same storms. It reminds you that the light doesn't care who tends it, as long as it is tended with care. You feel a sense of solidarity with everyone who has ever called a lighthouse home. You are all part of the same family, the family of the watchful. You hear a distant sound, the rhythmic throb of a marine engine. You walk to the window and see the supply boat approaching. It is a small, sturdy vessel, its bow cutting through the calm water. You watch as it gets closer, and you can see the figures of the men on the deck. They look small and insignificant against the vastness of the sea. You realize that, in a few minutes, you will be one of them. You will be back in the world of people and talk. You take a deep breath and exhale slowly. You are ready. You have done your duty, and you have found your peace. You pick up your bags and take one last look at the great Fresnel lens. It sparkles in the sunlight, a masterpiece of glass and light. You give it a small nod of respect, a silent goodbye to the machine that has been your focus for so long. You turn and begin the long walk down the stairs, 1, 2, 3. The squeaky step says goodbye in its own way. You reach the bottom and push open the heavy iron door. The air outside is warm and smells of the sea. You walk down to the landing and wait for the boat. The transfer is quick and efficient. The new keeper is a younger man, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and nervousness. You help him onto the rock and hand him the heavy brass key. You don't say much. There is no need for long speeches. You just give him a firm handshake and a small smile. You can see that he is already looking up at the tower, imagining the life he is about to start. You step into the boat, and as it pulls away, you look back at the lighthouse. From the water, it looks exactly as it did when you first arrived. A tall, white pillar standing defiantly against the blue of the sky. But you know what is inside. You know the warmth of the stove and the rhythm of the light. You watch the island get smaller and smaller until it is just a tiny speck on the horizon. You feel a sense of lightness, as if you have left a heavy burden behind on the rock. But you also know that you have kept the most important part. You have the memory of the light, and you have the silence in your heart. You are heading back to the world, but you are carrying the solitude with you. You are the keeper of your own internal flame now, and you know how to keep it burning. The boat moves steadily toward the mainland, and you find yourself watching the gulls that follow in the wake. They look like the same birds that lived on your rock, their white wings bright against the dark water. You realize that the ocean is the same everywhere. It is only our perspective that changes. You think about the traveling library and hope that the new keeper finds a book that he loves. You think about the harbor seal and hope it visits him on a sunny afternoon. You feel a sense of generosity toward the man who has taken your place. You want him to succeed. You want the light to stay bright. You realize that the lighthouse is bigger than any one person. It is a symbol of hope that belongs to everyone. You sit back on the wooden bench and let the sun warm your face. You are tired, but it is a peaceful exhaustion. You have completed your journey, and you have found what you were looking for. You close your eyes and listen to the sound of the engine and the wash of the waves. It is a different sound than the one you heard in the tower, but it is still the music of the sea. You are safe. You are going home, and the light is still there, standing watch on the edge of the world, a silent guardian in a universe of water and light. The world is very quiet now, isn't it? The waves have smoothed into a soft, glassy surface, and the wind has dropped to nothing more than a gentle whisper against the glass of the lantern room. You are tucked away in the very heart of the tower, safe within walls of stone that have stood for 100 years and will stand for 100 more. The heavy wool of your blanket feels warm and comforting against your skin, and the air around you is still, smelling faintly of clean salt and the fading scent of a beeswax candle. You can feel your pulse slowing, matching the slow, rhythmic beat of the lighthouse clock. Tick, tock, cock. It is a sound that tells you everything is as it should be. The light is spinning, the ships are safe, and your work is done. You don't need to think about tomorrow, or the mainland, or the noise of the world. You only need to be here, in this moment of perfect, golden peace. The shadows are long and soft, draping the room in a velvet darkness that feels like a hug. You watch the tiny dust motes dancing in the last sliver of lamplight, moving in slow, lazy circles until they disappear into the gloom. Your breathing is deep and steady, a mirror of the tide far below. The ocean is at rest. The birds have tucked their heads under their wings. The great glass lens is a silent, shining guardian above your head. You are part of the light, and the light is part of the night. Let your thoughts drift away like sea foam, dissolving into the vast, dark beauty of the deep. Sleep is coming now, as natural and inevitable as the moon.